Hi all, do you like spooky tales? If yes, press that subscribe button and join our spooky Dark Whispers family. Write in the comments where you are today, let us get into some. My name is Jessica from Barlow, Ohio. When I first saw Jack, he seemed really nice and caring. He was so easy to talk with and always knew what to say. I was healing from my last relationship and felt safe with him. We lived together for a year without problems, but he became jealous soon after. He stayed quiet when I laughed at work jokes. He checked up on me every now and then, giving me panic moments. At first, I thought it was just care, but later I felt like a prisoner. When I asked him for space, I was met with shouting. He pleaded next day, but I didn't trust him. I packed my bag and left that night while he was busy with work. It hurt him. There were numerous calls and texts from him every day, asking if I missed him or was I okay. That time I was seeing him, I thought of him all the time. At the start, his messages became darker. He said, I ruined his life. It made him want to harm me. So, I blocked him. He made fake accounts to reach out. He waited outside my job. My coworkers walked me to my car. I told the police, but they could not help unless he had harmed me. They warned me to be careful. One late night at work, I was worn out and tired. All I wanted was to get home. The night was hot and humid when the cool air hit me. It was soothing as I drove home through deserted roads. I gave some more turns. When I got into the parking lot, it was near empty, few cars scattered under flickering streetlight. I picked up my stuff and went out. Then that feeling came back, as if somebody was watching me. It was just my imagination, but then some footsteps came fast behind me. I turned when Jack jumped out of the bushes. There was no time for a scream as something sprayed out all over my face. My skin burned and felt like it was melting. The pain was intense. Jack's voice echoed, saying he would ruin my life. I screamed as the acid spread. People rushed to help. I was in a bright hospital. The acid had burned my skin and made me blind. Jack was arrested, saying I would never forget him. The news called it a tragedy. I was left with scars and no sight. Recovering was very hard. The pain from surgeries was too much. I had to stop working as a waitress because the scars on my face scared customers away. The manager let me go and sounded sorry for me. I don't like to go out much now. People stare at me. They don't mean any harm, but I can tell they're looking. Some quickly look away like they're embarrassed, and kids ask their parents why my face looks like that as their parents hush them up. I keep my curtains shut most of the time. I do not use mirrors at all. It is better not to see my own face. Jack is in prison for life, but that doesn't feel fair. He isn't dead. He can still breathe and talk. I am stuck in this body that has so much pain that never goes away entirely. I once thought that restraining orders would protect me from danger, but I have learned the hard way that some threats are real. Just because someone loved you once doesn't mean they want to ruin your life things now. My name is Jenna. I am from Silver Creek, Colorado. When I ended it with my ex-boyfriend Cody, I thought I was finally free from him. I moved into a new apartment, got a new job, and changed gyms. I did not want anything to do with him again, so I blocked his number and deleted him off social media. However, this made Cody angry. At first, it was just little things like getting a missing you text from an unknown number or hearing a friend mention that he asked about me. Then one day, I saw him in the grocery store. The store close to entrance viewed by me days ago outside my work. He leaned his car against, although not weird, but my friends waited up for good ones got the card because of. The slander couldn't care themselves thus. I thought I changed my mind. As the walking continues in gym, gas stations, apartments undercover, he stood watching silently. Police told they couldn't do much since he didn't threaten or break any laws. They said I should get a restraining order but need proof of threats. Suggested staying alert and collecting evidence. Modified my routine, different stores, gym times. He always showed up frightening me when I was careless. Home honest light on, locking windows and doors. After showering, sleeping, saw kitchen light on, red rose on table, shocked mind froze. It was clear. She was upset about her boyfriend in jail. She was waiting for him to get out. I felt bad for her, but I couldn't tell her the truth yet. It would hurt her more. So I lied and spun a tale instead of just one, made up of something only Karen told me at that time. I mixed up the rest of the story. How it ended was about whether the same person acted or not. Then I'd connected by thinking the same happened to me. My friends saw me having no regard for girls, like Spider-Man being naive. 5 months later, there was no news. I prayed a lot in church. Then I got the message saying my visa had been denied. This was the first time such happened. In those 4 months back after that, I was too thinking about asking God for the visa to see family. Yet I did not once again have free flow of ideas with regard to solving my own problems. The Lord was now accursed, as if my friends faced and specialists meant much more than my prayers and hopes. I could not lie evenly in bed. I was frightened because my flat was locked, but then I was not quick to get the glass sliding door of my balcony to shut. I did not want it freely open. My flat is on the 2nd floor. Asterisk, I moved to the loo. I felt my hand shaking badly while I took my phone. I was trying hard to get 911's numbers, but it didn't look I was succeeding. I stuck to redialing till I heard parts connected. Then suddenly some noise came from an area in my flat. I went still after holding my breath. When I heard those dreadful steps, being an owner of my flat, I murmured the address. Somebody is in my house. Police is on the way. Stay calm. As I yet wished I'd not heard footsteps or voice. Asterisk. Then something knocked real gently just as I felt the accumulated tension from inside my mind those days. I did not respond. I was expecting my place would drown us. Police came with the sirens, waking me up abruptly. They were rushing to check. My flat is being worn out. When they started not far from the railing seeing me, and despite this, I had relocated to somewhere across town. A few weeks stayed in the company of another newbie friend, even whom I was important afraid. That did, however, have at least it eased a bit of my tension being out of where the crime had suffered, and hence moved them securely than they're at home any longer. But deep down in the spirit of mine was still aware that it was not ended yet about what had just been going on before this last week there. At any rate, with this sort of friendship made you feel there's hope as such. The cops did patrol my flat. I was quite scared about going back home. I stayed at home every night until those locks had been checked. After some time, I felt as if I heard a noise. Cody had messed with my stuff. I applied for a restraining order. The court date was scheduled, but it would take time. The police couldn't find any proof though. They told me to write down everything that happened, be alert, but I just didn't find that very helpful advice. I had a baseball bat, pepper spray, and a knife in my handbag. I changed my number and deleted my social media accounts. For a bit, it was peaceful. But then one night after my long shift, I decided to go back home to fetch my remaining things. My friend offered to join me, but I felt as if I was burdening her. I assured myself that maybe Cody had finally given up. I was wrong though. I entered my flat and locked the door after me. Everything was just how I had left it. I switched on the lights and started packing my suitcase. I forgot my toiletries and checked under the bed for things I had missed. I wanted to get in and out in 10 minutes, but the moment I opened the bathroom door, I saw my hairbrush there with some of my hair on it still. I hadn't left it there. By then, I had packed up my week's worth of stuff already. When I looked at the mirror, there was already a hairbrush there, and it was very dirty, hence I swore hardly as I could. Slowly, I started realizing that my heart was beating more slowly than normal. As I stood in the bathroom before it happened, all I could think about was how he would come for me. The knife made my stomach hurt, but I didn't want him to know. I had the bat, though I knew Mom would be mad. But no one's perfect, right? I slowly inched closer to that shower curtain. Was I really going to pull it open? Yes. Nothing was there, just calm water that seemed normal enough. It felt like I'd left something out though, Kyrie, the way dead leaves feel sometimes. But before I knew it, that door banged shut. The door was shut with a wild bang, and it stood in the way of my safety, Cody. My heart swelled with a big pride that was shocked, because those were not eyes of a real beast. Those bright eyes just blurred the line between humans and beasts. But they were not smiles, really. So I think I wouldn't let you just go on. But my throat was so tight, with fear and even tighter into the bat, that my palms felt like running water. And he came closer as I suppose together. Did you think I am so Monster Rankins, Jenna? He asked, shaking his head. After what we had been through together, you just threw it all away. Trust me." I raised out the bat with trembling hands. "Stay back!" My voice came out barely working. Then Cody smiled in laughter at me, which made me feel more helpless. So when I swung, he dodged and then grabbed my wrist before slamming me down. The bat fell to the floor. The pain in my arm made me cry out. He was even stronger than he seemed. I tried to arm myself with pepper spray. "You can run, but you can't escape me, Jenna." My body did not obey me. He took me out of the washroom and into the bedroom. Then I saw a pair of clippers lying on my nightstand. He was controlling me. My screams were drowned out by the buzzing of the clippers. I only begged him to take pity on me. The hair piled in my lap as I cried, but he was unfeeling. All I could do was cry. I could hardly hear the sound of sirens approaching in the distance. He heard them too. His face turned pale. He suddenly let go of me and ran. The officers arrived. I was shaking. My head was badly hurt. With my statement, they found security footage from the past shows he had entered the building. They found fingerprints on the toilet door. They already had everything. He was caught and taken to jail. He will serve 5 years, but it is not forever. I relocated to another state. I am going through therapy. But every time I meet a man who has the same stature or hears a voice that sounds like his, my belly shakes. I am afraid that one day he will be released and he won't allow me to live in peace. But I hope that won't happen. My name is Sam. I come from Greenhaven, Pennsylvania. My ex Matt and I were together for 5 years. I never thought he would do this to me. He was always talking about moving abroad, especially to Thailand. That was his dream, but I had my career and family here. I didn't want to give everything up for him. At first, it was just a casual talk. He would say how amazing it would be to start fresh somewhere far off. I would nod and humor him, but didn't take it seriously. But over time, it turned into a demand. He started talking about it as if it was already planned out, and I had no choice. When I told him I wasn't interested in leaving, he dismissed my concerns, saying I'd love it once we got there. He would sulk for days, then act like nothing happened. It got tense, with every argument centered on this. He called me selfish and said I was holding him back. I told him he was free to go, but I wasn't going with him. That was when the fights turned nasty. He would raise his voice, slam doors, and punch walls. I remember the first time I saw a hole in our wall from a punch. I just stared blankly. He didn't even apologize, just left the room as if nothing had happened. He cried, pleading that he would change. It would last some time, then relapse into anger and obsession. The last fight was close to becoming physical. He grabbed my arm but didn't hurt me. I ended it then. He didn't believe me at first. He talked about starting again far away often. I laughed and didn't take him seriously. But he said stubborn about it. When I didn't want to go, he was angry. It felt like I had to go. He would ignore my concerns. And yet I could no longer think of him as being with me so much henceforth. So I learned that he had been controlling. And he felt like he could put me under constraint, which made me clash with my parents and friends. He told me not to bring problems, but I had to say something. And then he got angry when from sometimes I kept forgetting. In the end, I decided that I couldn't let myself become what he wanted. It was good at first. He said things. But little things just drove me a little nuts. Then it blew up. He would grip my hand. He was not hurting me. I stood really still. I said we were done and forever. But he did not get this. He'd send me texts and calls which seemed friendly. A break in my phone. Then he got mean. He called me a liar and threatened me. I found him creepy. I blocked him. I avoided him. I changed my routes. Other people noticed, so my folks got me to come stay with them. I needed space. That was fine until Matt knocked on door at my parents' house. I was with Dad. Mom was in the kitchen. Dad opened the door. Matt stood there. Pale face, wide eyes, strained look. Never seen him like this before. He said, "Let me in." Dad blocked him. Matt looked at me. "We need to talk Sam now." My dad told me to be quiet and said that Matt didn't want to talk to me. Matt's face became twisted as he came closer. My dad put his hand on Matt's chest to stop him. Suddenly, Matt went crazy. In a blink of an eye, he was hitting my dad in the face. My dad stumbled back. Matt hit him again and again. I screamed. Blood was everywhere. My dad tried to protect himself, but Matt kept hitting. I grabbed my phone, trembling. I dialed 911 with a shaky hand. "Please, send someone." Matt looked at me. For a moment, I thought he would come after me too, but he ran away. By the time the cops came, Matt was already gone. My dad lay on the floor, his face swollen, blood coming from his mouth. Mom was crying at the hospital. They found out Dad had broken ribs and a fractured jaw. He needed surgery. Matt was nowhere to be found. Then we learned why. He had bought a plane ticket and left for Thailand. I thought Matt was out of my life for good. After what he did, I hoped he'd stay far away. But even from far away, he was still haunting me. The police said they couldn't do much because Matt had no criminal record before and he had left the country. There was a dead end with the case. They couldn't get him back unless he came back on his own. He had just gotten away with it. My dad was in the hospital for weeks after surgery. Whenever I visited, I felt guilty. I thought it was my fault for letting Matt into my life. My mom said it wasn't my fault, but I could tell she blamed me too. After Dad came home, things were not the same. I was always looking over my shoulder. I checked the locks twice before sleeping. My phone buzzed, making me jump. I blocked Matt everywhere, but he found a way. He emailed hi with just my name. Then he said, "You look good in blue," showing a photo of me at work. I reported to police, but they said it wasn't enough evidence. I couldn't sleep, checking doors, windows, and lights. I hoped this was just another mind game by Matt. He was far away trying to scare me. My mom called me. She was anxious and stuttering. I had seen Matt. My mom was at the car after shopping. She saw a car there with a person inside. He was looking at her. My mom went to her car. She locked it and drove home. He didn't follow her. He wanted her to know he was there. I took a bag and stayed at my parents' house, helping them. For 2 nights, nothing happened. I stayed up watching the street. The police were going to patrol more, but they could not stay all the time. On the 3rd night, I heard a noise. It woke me up. I went to the front door. My parents were sleeping upstairs. I saw someone trying the door to see if it was open. I was scared. I hid and tried to call 911. Before I could, the person stopped and the footsteps went away. When the police came, the man had already gone, but he left a note that said, "Hope to see you soon." The next morning, my parents went to sleep at my aunt's place. I stayed at a friend's. I only went where needed and always had somebody with me. I deleted my social media and changed my phone number. For weeks, there was nothing. Then I got confirmed news of Matt's travel back to Thailand. I'm Lauren from Lakefield, Illinois. I used to teach elementary school. My life was simple, I worked hard and was good at my job. David, my boyfriend, and I met through friends. He was charming and made me laugh. But he became controlling. He would get jealous when I went out without him. He wanted to know who I was talking to at work. He twisted things around on me, and I felt guilty for not trusting him. We had been together for almost 4 years. At first, everything was good, but then he became jealous and controlling. I didn't want to upset him, so I avoided small arguments. It was tiring for me. The videos we filmed together back then seemed harmless. I trusted him and thought they were private. Breaking up with him was a tough choice. I got fed up with the fights through texts, and it only drained me. I thought he'd be sad and beg me to stay. However, he turned aggressive fast. At first, he sent sweet messages trying to win me back. Then his kind gestures changed once I didn't respond in his desired way. He started accusing me of being with someone else. David was out to get me for trying to show his intimate videos. He knew how much I valued my job. He claimed he would expose the videos if I didn't retract my words. I believed he wasn't serious. He seemed mad but not foolish enough to risk his own hard-earned job just to get back at me. One morning, I woke up to a friend's text. It contained a link, so I opened it to see the videos he posted online. I was startled as I saw my face, body, and voice in them. I had forgotten them entirely. The comments underneath were horrible. Some were very mean. Others were disgusting. I should have died with shame as one referred to my full name and another my job position. My body went weak. I could only read through without being able to respond. It felt as if I was on the edge of a terrific sickness. It was hard to keep breathing, and staying still made my heart rate rise too high. I wanted help from my best buddy without any assurance that he would be present when I needed him the most. So I texted David demanding him taken down those videos immediately. His response was cold and uncaring when he said, "I hope you thought about this before you left the work that made sense to you. The feelings such as something happening to my students, coworkers, and the principal overwhelmed me too much. Instead of confronting me, he only sent me away one-on-one talk. The board members were outraged when they called. My life became a nightmare when an unexpected meeting took place. I was feeling this guilt for what David had released. I wished to speak up for myself and declare that I was the victim. However, I realized that, as a teacher of young children, I was responsible for what had happened. I had let the pupils access the internet. Therefore, I had already caused harm to them. I took my belongings and left the school for the last time. Yet, that was not the end. Once something is published online, it stays on the internet forever. Strangers around began contacting me and calling names. My photograph was on the board, and I did not want to know about them. My neighbors began to act as if I were one to be avoided. Even my friends kept their distance, some out of embarrassment while others feared getting involved in the scandal. I thought of going to the police, but I knew how it would go. There was no proof of hacking. My videos were just regarded as having been agreed to. Thus, it was not viewed as a crime. It was just a mistake. Hence, I made the choice to move away. The only option was to go with my cousin to begin life anew in another territory. Still, I was in danger there. 1 month after my move, a fresh account was created sharing the videos again. The usernames and platforms changed. Whenever I requested certain videos to be removed, they were re-uploaded elsewhere. This was not merely an act of revenge. David aimed at ruining my entire life. I blocked all unfamiliar numbers. I deleted my social media accounts. Nevertheless, David always found ways of proving to me that he was not through with me. The last note I received from him was simple: "You can run, but the internet never forgets." For trusting the wrong person, I lost my career, home, dignity, and everything. My name is Maggie. I've rebuilt my life some since then, but I wish I had known that trusting someone could destroy me. Be careful who you trust. I lived in a small apartment near Denton Springs, Texas. I had worked on modeling for years. Things were starting to happen for me. I got some decent gigs, signed with an agency, and landed paid shoots. I felt like I was on my way. Then I broke up with Ryan. He was controlling, but it wasn't obvious at first. He made me feel guilty for everything. If I booked a job in another city, he made snide comments. If I posted a revealing photo, he went cold. Over time, I felt I had to ask permission. When I dumped him, he just stared at me and said I was making a mistake. I thought that was it, but my hair started falling out in big chunks, not just a few strands. The stress of modeling made me strain too much heat, makeup, and work. I lost more hair. Then, I went to see a skin doctor. There was no evidence of deficiencies or new medicines. I was told to relax, but I knew something was off. I tried various brands, no heat, and deep conditioner. After a while, nothing worked. Bald spots appeared and hid under caps away from the agency glare. A friend mentioned Ryan had spoken about getting even with my hair products. It dawned on me that they were causing my problem. Ryan had the apartment key. I did not change the locks, but I tossed away all the shampoo and uncovered twisted caps. They had an odd smell. I called the cops but lacked proof. The officer understood but was unable to assist. I changed locks but was already bald and damaged scalp. Confidence also lost. I attempted to sue Ryan, but he got away with it while I lost my modeling career. Some were suspicious at this relationship as my hair grew dull soon after I dated him. Eventually, wigs come in handy, but he moves on like nothing happened. Trust your instincts. Change locks after the breakup always. I thought once, maybe things would get better. My life is forever altered, however. That is something to be shared with others. When moving to online learning, I saw it offered a multitude of benefits unavailable in traditional schools. I was more productive studying at home. Yet I lost interest because of my hectic schedule and performance problems. I realized online learning lacked engagement as compared to what I had expected. Hence, I pondered whether it was wise to continue. I have thought about how I would handle a real job without putting the knowledge I gained in school to good use. I also reflected on our classes in university and realized how neither of them would ever lead to any assessment being done in any other way. While I was still lost in this state of thought, I began forming the idea that maybe the answer could still come, but there was no way I could see it clearly. Ultimately, I chose to go the familiar route. I mean, what I studied here showed a bit of the theory and facts with little practical work. No expression at all. Then he raised just one hand to run his fingers on the door shape as if he were picturing ways of opening it. At that moment, I felt like vomit. I took the video recording straight to the police together with scratches on the lock and texts from my friend about Ryan's revenge. The officer showed sympathy but said more than once there was nothing they could do unless a crime had been committed already. This meant that I had to wait until he hurt me. There was no answer from the officer. I spent a sleepless night with lights on and a knife beside me. Each sound at home made my heart pound. I knew that Ryan was getting worse, but what could I do? My family is not nearby. Moving would cost money, which I lacked. Yet, I was not going to let him intimidate me away from home. I should have ran away 3 days after that when I woke up to the sound of the doorknob turning. My heart hammered as I listened intently when the knob turned harder. My door was scratched again, just like Ryan used to do when he attempted to enter. My shaking hands dialed 911 and I whispered, "Somebody is breaking into my apartment." Officers came but did not find anything. After they left, I ran out and moved into a hotel. I was terrified. Later, I hired movers. I called my landlord, "Please let me get out of this scary place." Once I was home with no phone number or social media accounts. No one knew where I was except for a few friends. That was 1 year ago. I still feel fearful. I had my first job at a floor where I did not know anyone. My team had Jason, a guy I later got to know. How we met when the laptop was needed by me. This was Jason's job. He had a sense of humor, and I was guided by him. We became friends so fast, and we talked. After some little talk about coffee, Jason proposed on a date. We went out 3 times before being a couple. This happened so fast, but I was tired of being single. Men like him few and far between. Still, I was not sure. I had doubts, but I could not comprehend why. Jason was transparent. Unlike other guys I had met, there was no argument or disrespect for each other, and each of us was to speak openly with him there. Vulgarism was never used by him. Eventually, I learned that the trust must be mutual. I was attracted to Jason. I never stopped once to think about him when we met. Everything was good. I was on cloud 9 dreaming about my new boyfriend until about 2 months later, it all changed. We started to become different. He was not an animal fan and I was feeling ugly. I had 2 dogs and 3 cats. They were family and not animals to me. I first thought he was not used to them as he was making remarks about their upkeep and how dirty I was. One night he said very casually that if we went to become serious, I had to give away or abandon. I thought that this was too much. He regarded my animals as things I could not keep on being with anyone. I was really pleased that it showed its true colors so early on. The breakup was clear-cut. Jason texted me to meet up at our favorite park. We hadn't met in ages, but he wanted to talk. I was glad that he was not around. They had completely different kinds of floors where we worked. I went out with my pets and enjoyed the single life. At the park, I felt a bit nervous. He talked about the good times we had with my family. I know he did think so much of them, but didn't want to say it either. The fun we had was still on my mind. I could tell he'd been acting like he'd been forced to be friends with me. But now, going back, there would be so awkward. He seemed sincere, so we agreed to meet again at some other time, though things happened again as I'd wished for. Thus, I still knew that our future was bright. A little over a week later we met, but it was not okay at all. No matter what way us getting along with one another would mean the same thing as before was completely different. He seemed so interested, yet there were no big deals between us anymore. I guess I could say that things happen again the way people expected them to happen. So I knew we would meet eventually. He was dropping hints then. I felt bad earlier, maybe I was unkind towards him, I liked him. Then relieved to see him again. After that long time, it made things clear. If I did not overanalyze this, even after going through all those details just to avoid hurting him again in the future. Yet he was still anxious, as Casanova already played his game, but he needed more reassurances. I knew deep within that I could not betray the feeling I had for only him, but we talked on and on all night long without being concerned any longer about anything else at all. Again, I thought about the fact that he is just another guy like anybody else. So much has changed between us. Now I am simply being myself. If he wants us to be nothing different from this, it is quite okay. I suppose my possession is crucial. This no one could change the feelings that fester inside until one day when at last you get to know who really matters a lot to one another with regards to those feelings. I did not mind it at all. Then he could have wanted me to have some closure or seek for another opportunity. I did not wish for us to be back together again, but I thought having an honest chat face to face would do no harm, since it is being gentle at heart. As the encounter day approached towards nearer, I experienced an unusual sensation, and this cannot be explained anyhow about what had happened all through this period, which sounded as if there was something not right wrong. Beneath my instinct not to permit myself, there was something abnormal taking place yield. I called my brother Daniel. He is large and strong, but he has a big heart. When I said that I was anxious to meet Jason at the park, he agreed to come along. He would keep a low profile in case I needed him. There was a delay in arriving at the park. Daniel dropped me off, then went looking for parking. I sat down on the bench where Jason and I used to meet. The place was quiet, and that made me uneasy. The night was dark. The creepy silence sent shivers to my spine. A cold shiver ran down me. The wind rustled, and suddenly I heard a noise behind. I turned slowly around, and my heart skipped a beat. 3 men in the shadows. They wore masks, and their eyes looked at me intently. I felt a chill as my intelligent mind started working. I had to get away from that crowd in an instant. My mind was spinning with panic. My head felt tight, but I knew that wouldn't help. They got closer, moving slowly. Every part of me wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt trapped like a bug in a spider's web. Suddenly, an angry voice shouted, "Who are you? Get away from my sister!" I saw a man sprinting towards us. He was huge. The park lights showed his shadow. The men hesitated. They thought it would be easy to intimidate the girl and her brother. When they saw this man who was charging towards them, they thought again about wanting to put any of the 3 boys that were with them out of action without any effort. They turned and ran into the dark. I was shocked. I forgot my brother was there until my brain caught up. I ran to him, he grabbed my arm, and wordlessly we left that terrible place. We didn't talk until we got safely into his car. We drove fast toward my place, catching our breath in silence. At last, we talked about what just happened. We thought about going to the police, but there wasn't any proof linking Jason to it. Only 3 masked guys that could be anyone. Yet, I knew in my gut it was definitely Jason. The thought chilled me. A few days later, I found out Jason just stopped working with no explanation or farewells. He was gone as if he had fallen off the planet. Firstly, I was relieved, but soon I felt dread. Now, I didn't know where he was. I still dream about that night, recalling each detail, struggling to understand what could have occurred, if not for my brother. It scares me to think of the terrible fate that might have awaited me. So listen to your intuition. It can indeed be a lifesaver. Over 10 years ago, when I was 31, relationships for me used to be chaotic. That was until I met my husband, who's now 32. For 6 years, I underwent 2 violent romances. The first guy, Alex, was age 36 when I ended things at 19 after 2 terrible years together. He persuaded me to leave school and move in with him, hitting me and constantly abusing me. I believed I was worthless, totally alone. He lied, saying my family rejected me. Even at work, he tore me down with harsh words. While I worked long hours, he pretended to be injured and lazy at home. Eventually, I saw through him and ran away back home. A few months later, though, I went back to Alex's manipulations. My parents could not take it anymore and threw me out. Daniel was a new friend. He seemed kind at first. I thought I was finally safe from Alex, but Daniel knew my secrets. He used my past to control me. He knew of the harm Alex did. Daniel never hit me. His words hurt much more. They dug deep into my mind, made me feel weak and scared. I had been hurt many times. At 14, 17, and again afterward. Being around others terrifies me. I panic when someone gets close. My heart races. I can't breathe. Daniel targeted what had happened to me. He made it a weapon. I felt trapped. He twisted my trauma against me. I have nightmares. They seem real, and I wake up sweating. Sometimes I can't move. Daniel never hit me, but he would throw things when he got mad. I felt like I didn't exist. He controlled everything. I had no friends and no thoughts. When I got a job, he quit his. I had to give him all my money. He said it was for weed. I talked to my parents, but I didn't go back home. Daniel manipulated me. I had to sleep on a broken bench while he got the bed. Even in bed, he called his ex. I told him that he'd have to be with her, but he shouted at me for being crazy. I let him treat me bad for 4 years. Daniel was married before, but his ex didn't want him to pay for divorce. Still, he kept saying we would marry and have kids someday. It was a well-paying job. I bought a house after getting it, but it was still under the rent-to-own agreement. However, Daniel told me not to put my name on it. He made me buy the cars as well as 2 motorcycles. Somehow, Daniel was always on top. We were finally stable. After struggling for years, I secured a good position at work. I worked so hard that I was exhausted at times. Before I turned 30, I was debt-free except for the loan from jobs which paid for lectures, car bills. At work, I became popular. I was with patients I wish they knew I was their confidential nurse, but their family came along during my visits. I found the mother in the house already living there. It was nightmarish. She would show off surreptitiously the soiled sheets. I got into the exclusive CNA course in the area. One day I heard about it being kick-ass, so I worked hard finishing at the top of my class. Daniel flat out told me he would ensure I lost my current job if I took a second one at that time. I could not be reliant on him nor follow him through my certification for CNA. As a result, I borrowed my friend Marie into sharing my apartment. She had 2 kids. It was laughable that she was the very friend responsible for my parents' rejection. She also happened to be the wedded partner of a man I dared to fall in love with. He broke my heart big time. At long last, I forgave her. This turned out for worse. As she persuaded Daniel to be unfaithful to me, Daniel had sex with her at home where I lived. The state took away one of Marie's children long before that. Eventually, I had to leave my father's house after packing all my stuff. My life had become unbearable. I consumed whiskey regularly every day and went without food most of the time. I hardly spoke. I either wept myself to slumber or fell asleep after drinking. This continued for months. Even though I had moved on from Daniel in December, I still kept meeting him secretly, hoping that things would get okay among us. Via signals warning me. He turned out staying with Marie and lied about it again. Yet I believed him whenever he gaslighted me. For this reason, on Valentine's Day 2018, an unfathomable incident occurred. Everything fell apart. I had just received awful news from the doctor. I might have cancer. Feeling numb, I went straight to Daniel's house. I needed to confide in him and to find some comfort. However, when he saw me at the door, he quite unceremoniously slammed it in my face as if I meant nothing to him, this being the lowest point of my life. I finally quit my job, got sober, and started the long journey of piecing my life back together. After a year of struggle, an old buddy from middle school reached out to me through social media. I was in awe that we got back in touch after so long. Eventually, we fell in love and later got married. He is patient and gentle with me, knowing everything I have been through. He would go to great lengths just to keep me safe. But there is a big concern in the midst, which is Daniel. Daniel, who was formerly a monster in my life, has now married a woman called Renee. I cannot be sure of her age only, but seems to be in the 30s with children from a previous marriage with Daniel. It was not long until she turned him into using meth again, just like his past behavior. Things took a steep dive within about 3 months after they started dating. She at one point shared a sick wish to be tied to Daniel on a particular night when out partying, leaving her kids with their grandparents. This did not go well at all. He tied her dog to barbed wire while she was out partying. He locked her pets in the shed and set her house on fire. My friend told me it was not long afterwards. I felt so sad. Daniel said he wished someone would die. This made me feel scared too. He was angry that she lost everything. He had not been arrested for fire and cruelty. People around were crying because of him. No one punishes him for his actions. I was afraid that he was going to come after me next. I met Daniel in the grocery store after I quit my job. The moment I saw him, I got panic. My heart sank and I held my breath. I stood still on the line. I was looking at him all the time, but when I looked away, it hurt me in the face. He showed no love and had too much hatred. He accused me of doing this. I could not picture the extent he would go to. I do not lay blames anymore. I have a permit for carrying guns, own 2 pistols, and keep the doors locked. I foot for people. I changed my number because Daniel and Alex stalked me. Staying alive is a big thing for me. Do not lose sight of those warning signs. Someone can love you for real. Be careful when it comes to your relationships. Do not be with those who run you down. Get out while there is still time. My name is Jake. I am 27. There is a tale that still frightens me. I was lying down on my bed thinking of how I met Emily at a friend's party. I was so into her qualities and laughed a lot with her. It was a perfect relationship as we always showed love to one another. We were companions. We had deep talks about life. We built each other up. Long-term plans were started. A year in, we decided to move in together. Some said it was soon. I wondered about waiting on it. Those first months were glorious. It was like a dream. Kitchen packing for trips, not carrying on lazy Sundays. Movies turned into talks lasting till dawn. Life had been perfect again. But then things changed overnight. 7 months in, the warmth faded. Cold indifference took over. Every little thing bugged us. She'd leave bathroom light on. My socks on the couch hurt her head. The house turned into a battlefield. After the house was tension-filled, constant fights wore me and sleepless nights. There was no love or passion. The connection grew distant. Weakness replaced closeness. The emotional cords were cut. Wasted potential became the norm. Silence filled our mails. We talked about life deeply, but now we are just 2 strangers living together. I don't get why we didn't just break up before our lease was up. Maybe we just did not want to deal with it. It was hard after the breakup to still live in the same house. We hoped for help that would never come. Then one night we argued over dirty dishes. Voices were raised and doors were slammed. I realized that I hated her. I had to end it once and for all. We agreed to stick together till the lease ended, but I moved into the spare room. After that week, it was awful. I felt nothing for her. I was restless. So I tried a dating app just for something casual. Once I had a match on a dating app. She and I had a connection. We talked on the phone. I felt less alone in my apartment. Emily and I had broken up. There was no chance of us getting back together. One night, my new girlfriend and I were chatting. Then I heard banging at my door. I got scared. It felt like someone was hammering against it. I told my girlfriend I had to go. I hung up. It was Emily yelling my name. She was angry. Things were crashing outside my door. I had never seen this side of her. She sounded crazy. I was scared for my safety. I called 911. The sirens were coming. One neighbor made a call to cops, and some few minutes after police arrived, they moved Emily away from the door. As she was kicking and crying, 2 of them were being watched by me, and I wondered what she was going to say. I was shaking with disappointment, having no idea how she would twist the story. At that time, I could still perceive that thin air feeling. I placed my belongings in a bag without being seen by the cops. There was such a tight atmosphere. When I was on my way out that evening, I stopped at a gas station to get some drinks and snacks. I then phoned Mom and told her about my dumb ex. I didn't like how she insisted that I returned home. Thus, I had to take very strict measures against Emily that involved cutting every communication, including telephone number used, and blocking every means through which she could stretch. Fortunately, she never contacted me in any way. The thought of it still gives me goosebumps till now whenever I hear loud knocks on my door. The early month there was in 2014 when it was that I started dating this boy Ryan. Staying in a small flat downtown, I was struggling to get by with my job in the bookshop and support from my parents. However, it was the first time I felt that I could be self-sufficient. Most of my days were occupied looking for jobs in my line. There were very few interviews, consequently it appeared grim. But I could walk to work in minutes, and also some old college friends resided in the vicinity, which made my life a little bit bearable. I preferred walking compared to taking the public transport, for both these places were, in some manner, like my home with my buddies. My friends from college had been Ryan and Panda. Our friend group slowly dispersed after graduation. It was only the two of them that lived nearby. Ryan was staying with some of his gaming pals who happened to be his old online friends. He met while playing first-person shooting such as Call of Duty and Counter-Strike. I never liked those games, but one night when I went to see him, I was curious as to why he was so into them. When I got there, they were playing them, so there would not be any other way for me to pass that night. Hence, I opted to go see him upon entering, of which I discovered that the apartment was dark. Two roommates were watching television with their hands on the controllers. I tried talking to Ryan, however, his roommates gave me looks as if I had interrupted a crucial moment. After all, Ryan requested them to noticed, did not like me. I was trying to be friendly, but he was distant. This might have been due to his disapproval for my association with Ryan, or probably I was just that person he hardly liked. I wasn't certain on this one. It was tense at first, yet I convinced Ryan to return to my home instead of the other one, which would at least grant us some seclusion from the events that transpired during the previous night. After that specific night, I could not help but feel uneasy each time I visited Ryan's apartment, which always had its roommates around. They were always there, never stepping out, and their presence created a strange air as if it were outside of the norm. Eventually, I began avoiding the place entirely. Ryan grew angry at my declaration of what I was feeling, stating that I was not attempting to fit in with his pals. It hurt a lot since I put in so much effort, even though at that moment we had not yet broken up. A few weeks later, however, another quarrel erupted over a minor matter. In hindsight, I realized the conflict was not the actual issue. There was an accumulation of other factors. Consequently, I blame Ryan's friends for being against me throughout the relationship, which ultimately resulted in the breakup. The pain was more than I had anticipated, and I focused on work and outlined my upcoming plans in an effort to recover. A week after that, something odd happened at work. Ryan's roommate Eric came into the store. From the other side of the store, I recognized him, but he did not notice me. I did not want to talk with him, yet there was no point in trying to hide myself. The distance from their apartment was far away from this vicinity, so I had no idea what he was doing here. I acted busy at the checkout counter by appearing occupied on papers. Then, through some brief moment of time, our eyes met. Thus, I hastily looked down at my grocery list, and my stomach churned. One night, I had a drink with my friends. I felt tired and decided to walk home. On my way, a familiar blue car slowly drove past me. It belonged to Ryan's roommate. I was sure of it. That made me start to worry. Ryan had been distant after our breakup, and now this was unsettling. I felt uneasy all night at home, although I told myself it was nothing. By the next week, I realized I was suspicious of everything. I tell myself to stop freaking out about signs. Ryan and I had ended things without a fuss. But now there were messages and odd looks being passed without any contact between us. Things were not that simple underneath the surface, I discovered. I had a closing shift. After I got done with my job, I went to Janine's place with friends. I walked there as it was warm outside. We had a drink. Later on, one of the girls got an idea to move to a bar. Everyone else was thrilled. I pretended to be happy also. The plan was to have fun, but I suddenly did not want to be with them. Sad smile, I told them I am going back home. Unlike most Fridays when the streets were full of cars tonight, though only a few of them were around. When I was halfway home, however, I saw a strange car following me. I feared that it was that horrible blue Toyota hatchback. Then, when I had grown more careful, I was forced backward into the car by two men wearing masks. I yelled and kicked, was thrown into the rear seat. There were two men seated in front with me. All of them had concealed their faces, but I discovered who they were by their odor. They stank of sweaty odor mixed with weed. They fervently stared at the mirror without saying anything, even after I screamed. They weren't normal, and I would only have been sitting helplessly in it while gazing back at them. shaking my head wet with tears. I didn't know where they were taking me. This wasn't a joke, it was real. I glanced out the window. We were on a narrow road. There were thick trees on both sides. No street lights, only darkness. I couldn't call for help. Then the car slowed and stopped. Two men got out. Their silence was terrifying. Then my door opened. One of them grabbed me, yanking me out. My body felt weightless, as if I wasn't in control. They hadn't tied me up, but I didn't fight yet. One man held my arm but loosely. I could break free if I tried. I knew I had one chance. I looked around. There were only trees around us. The road we came on was barely visible. I was about to run when I saw something that made me freeze. One of them had a gun. That changed everything. My heart was pounding. I felt dizzy. But I had to survive. Without thinking twice, I ripped my arm free and ran. I ran hard. The bushes under trees, the inn I heard were voices. The footsteps had thunder, sounded like mine. One voice yelled angrily. That some I didn't make out the words. But the second was Ryan's voice, that I recognized immediately. He kept punishing me. You were a thing, idiot. A new voice flew like you think stupid. I was breathing heavily. My chest hurt. I was tired, but I could not stop running. I was able to see light of distant road. That was my only chance. But I hesitated. What if they were still watching? What if I caught? A truck appeared with lights moving on the road. I began running, waving my arms to show desperation. Truck's driver, the concerned elderly of man, started calling police. A few minutes later, sirens were heard. Ryan and his friends swore it was just a prank. They claimed was in its totally bulls. I had no idea time. It was a toy gun, but didn't matter. They chased me down, took me against my will. They had to some serve time. Honestly, I them were thinking how could believe was okay terrible. This was the worst. I am Daniel, and I am 32 years old now. I met Sophia when I was 27 through my best friend Jake. Jake and I have been close friends since college. Sophia and I hit it off, immediately sharing inside jokes. Like the closeness of our friendship group was overwhelming and seemed very beautiful. Jake was very happy for us and always went out with us as a trio. Life was perfect with Sophia and Jake. We enjoyed shopping trips together, days out assisting each other in every way possible. On one weekend walk hike Jake, I took my friends there, had fun without much spending. In fact, this small trip is really significant later that when Sophia joked about how close I was with Jake, at first it was fun, then later it became rather sharp and sarcastic to say Jake did not appreciate our working relationship or care for me. I was somehow stunned, as this was my longtime best friend whom I couldn't imagine he was. That after all, I was feeling a little uneasy about Jake. Then Sophia told me how he was treating her, and I began to rethink things. Was he really acting like an outsider, or was it just my imagination? Sophia convinced me that he was keeping us apart. I did not want Sophia to be sad, so I distanced myself from Jake. I was just trying to help. However, I started to lose friends. Everyone I used to be close to stopped talking to me. Sophia told me that they were jealous of us. I believed her and did not question it. But then I found out the truth too late. Jake had not done anything wrong in my relationship with Sophia. As my friendships faded, Sophia became my everything. Then Sophia started to control me. She yelled that I forgot things we discussed. She said I agreed to things that never happened between us. We fought. She was the victim, and I was always blamed for everything. I began to doubt myself. I could not trust my memories anymore, only hers. Jake tried to talk to me, but I told him to back off. She said that the next step was to live together, but it turned out to be controlling. I was being watched constantly. I did not have any privacy anymore. I felt I was trapped, but I could not see it happening. I found an old photo of me, Jake, and friends smiling. It made me angry. I realized I had lost so much freedom. There was a voice inside me saying that this was all wrong. I knew I had to get out somehow. At first, I didn't know whether I should write to Jake, but I did anyway. He surprised me as he replied quick. I was guilty, but I told him of my confusion. He reassured me that he was on my side. When I'd finally learned the truth, I had wrongly trusted Sophia for too long. The pain of that made clear that I had lost much now with Jake. She got insecure and violent, and told me with not loving her enough when I pushed back, but Jake supported me in my struggle to let go of. Then it came a night. Things crashed harder. She found out about my contact with Jake and accused also me of attempting to sleep with his friend too. She made up that was a false claim, which angered me, as I has been more and more breaking free from Sophia's hold of me. I broke off with Sophia after she caught me cheating. She broke down and blamed me for all the problems, and even made me feel guilty, but I could not keep up with that poisonous relationship. Leaving the girl felt like part of me was gone, but I could breathe again later on. I needed Jake after separation. He helped me reconnect with old buddies. At first, they were suspicious of me. Some were even excited to have me back. I quickly realized I was not the same person at all. Jake and I were still very close while it was happening. After a while, one guy entered into my life. At first, I was cautious as I thought on what happened before, but gradually I let myself fall in love with him, as it was trust and respect at last. It sobered me how manipulation made a fool out of me previously. Take care of yourself like I did. Do not repeat my same errors. Surround yourself with people who love you. They are the ones who will help you find the way out. My name is Daniel. I am from Louisiana. I am 31 years old, but my life was a mess 12 years ago. I was 19 years old when my parents and grandparents died in a short time. I felt nothing but loss. I was looking for someone to hold on to. One night, feeling alone, I signed up for MySpace. Within minutes, I got a message from a woman I'll call Melissa. At first, I did not reply, because it seemed too fast and too random. She said I was handsome and asked how my day was. A few days later, she sent almost the same message again. This time, I replied casually, saying I was okay. We soon became good friends. A few months later, we were officially a couple. That was when things became strange. She got upset when I spent time with my friends or family. One day, I was playing video games with my friends when she showed up, angry. I don't like you being around them. You don't need anyone but me. Silly as it may seem, my loved ones doubted my innocence, not minding the trouble I encountered. They had been swayed by the fake tales spun by a lady named Charlie about me having bad friends. Beside being busy at work, I couldn't figure out how to convince my relatives that I had never wronged them. Only my kin were able to see through the lies. Just as a volcano erupts, that was the kind of pressure I bore. Whenever family members quarreled, it was tough for me. Also, I was sent a distress call by a cousin when I was working, and upon arriving I met Melissa, who was upset. "You were with another girl," she claimed. My job involved being friendly and kind to customers, so that puzzled me because the action taken by Melissa was not right. Following my departure from work, I could not figure out how she caught me chatting with customers. Only seeing myself walking around serving them as well made me too casual to observe around. She stood waiting for me when I came back. "Why did you betray me?" Melissa shouted. Henceforth, I stared at her. With no choice but close my car window and doors, she kicked and hit it. The driver's side window while her face was contorted with rage. "Open the damn door!" she shrieked. This sort of thing was unreal, just like a nightmare experience in a horror movie, yet I refused her. For sure, this was beyond ridiculous. I put my foot on the brake and went to reverse. As soon as I hit the road, I did start to notice headlights in my rearview mirror. The girl was on my heels while my town was small. Therefore, the highway was obviously the only real option to escape. I just thought that if I stepped up the pace and drove to the next low-key town until she gave up going after me, I would be okay. But I was wrong. She was still as close to me as a leash element, swerving around as though she wanted me to be thrown off the linkage of the road. I told myself I needed speed, because as far as I knew, breaking up was just the beginning. After a while, I had to stand lots of things from her, thus being single feels great. But not so much with her back's the hope of being with someone that I would like to have been really comes out more in relation to my ex-girlfriend again. She seemed undesirable at times, hence this reason about. That's the reason. That's why this makes it really hard for all girls. Kindred souls usually complete, as they knew triple extent I required. Its matter was really when pushed hard. Enough I call it too serious. Things needed to happen, else I was simply breaking up with her anyhow. Hence gradually turned it into a habit. Make daily stalk. He took on them. Every day looked like Howard the supermarket. It would block everywhere, telling me that better she is not against every time driven home. Allison remembers this friend who would come and go from fringes when he belonged to somebody knew how wrong them. After months last graduated, discovering they'd spent time all around since thing was cheesy least eventually. Despite having left, for instance, it had not been long since breaking point, when nowhere clarifying reasons behind feelings which said, even admitted after that time, but left. And now I stood, just got after living intense yet strange alike, saying, beneath those made my determination towards, maybe at times, was thought still supposed to easy lines. Thus his friend actually left beach, could not forget. Old ones wouldn't possible say too much. He does not keep anywhere happening, hardly. Worth on winters where standing lines in same situation, why many pity unluckiness causes ruin one another, hence tired. She knew about my life even after blocking her. I saw her outside my house one night. My friend was with me. I got scared. My ex was banging on the door. I called the police, but she ran away. This made me file for a restraining order, but it didn't help. She spread lies to my new friends. They thought I was still in her team. This ruined my new relationships. Later, I was with a new girl. The doorbell rang. I was scared. I peeked out and saw my ex again. I told my friend to call the cops. What was she doing here? I talked to Rebecca about my former friend. The new girl was chasing me. The sirens went off. Police asked me what happened. I said to stay away from her. I thought she would come back. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Rebecca. My heart sank. Her voice was calm, but her words were scary. Right after that, I went to the gas station. I saw a car slowly driving near me. It looked like Renee's car. I thought she was trying to scare me, so I ignored it. I was wrong. She suddenly sped towards me. My brain could not process it. Then I felt a sharp pain in my left shoulder and arm. I looked down and saw blood gushing out. She had stabbed me. I staggered back with my wounds. Then I heard a voice from behind me. It was Yolanda, my friend. She had a gun pointed at Renee. She told her to back off. Renee hesitated but then ran away when she heard police sirens. Yolanda saved me. If not for her, I might have died. Now, after all these years, I've been married for 11 years. Happy with my life. I heard that Renee was free now. She married a man with my name. The thought scared me. A month ago, I saw a request from her on Facebook with no picture or friends. Curiosity got me. I opened it. It was her. I felt uneasy. She said she was sorry about everything, that she had changed in prison. I blocked her before I could finish reading. I told my wife about that bad past. Therapy helped me cope with the pain. All I wanted was peace, no revenge or closure. I fell for him in high school. I thought he was the one crazy, right? I did marry him right after school. Just looking back, I ignored many signs. I was too much in a hurry to grow up. On my wedding eve, I sat with my mom going over plans. I hesitated, then asked if it was okay if I backed out. She laughed, took me as joking. How I wish I could have told her the truth. A year later, I told her everything that happened between me and him. I made her feel bad for not seeing what he had done to me, really. She couldn't have known. Nobody knew about my secret just 2 hours after. On my wedding day, he pushed me out of the truck in my parents' driveway, yelling for a divorce. He drove away, leaving me in my wedding dress. I sobbed and told my dad. He left me. My father was furious, but rationalized it as some bad joke. My dad was smiling as we saw the truck back. I wiped my tears away and went outside with a forced smile. We all did not let the truth be known. Months passed, with him being in the military. He was nice and sweet. I began to think that we might actually have a shot. Soon, we were moving to Texas. My mother one day accidentally took my phone and read a text from my ex. He was begging me not to leave and said he was a very bad boy. But I lied to her saying this was not him, he just felt lonely. I could see she still did not believe it, but she knew I was way too stubborn to heed any advice. I was still going to Texas with him though. Throughout my life, there were moments I made a choice that didn't end well. For example, I thought I demonstrated love to my spouse. One Thanksgiving holiday, I was chatting with my family. But the instant I put down the phone, he went berserk. You have to sever ties with your family. "I'm the only family you need," he shouted. Chuckling, I said, "No way." Without warning, he seized our wedding glasses and hurled them at me. I stood frozen in disbelief. Then he began smashing picture frames one after the other. My heart sank. That moment marked the end of my love for him. I went under the covers, hiding from him. I was in pain, but he thrived on that. Gradually, he tore me apart piece by piece. The night came when he dumped tools on the floor. He was like a time bomb, just waiting for failure. It gave me terrible fear. What if he tells on me? No matter how hard I tried, the smallest things would annoy him. He would have put more than enough before. All he said was, "It was just that towel you wrung out." The action of washing towels had led to my failure, which made me a resigned person. They were joking with him about being in the military, so he thought it was like a plot against him. I wasn't even there when he sent the first delivery. He yelled for hours, pacing back and forth, full of rage. When he went into the bedroom, I was left there stunned. Then he said, "You're an idiot. Is this meant to embarrass me, or are you just very brainless?" It snapped something in me. I told him I was done. All he did was yell, complain, and blame me for all the things he messed up. He never supported me, only tore me down. Then he looked at me with that empty rage, the kind I've heard other soldiers talk about. Beyond anger, it felt inhuman. Then he lunged for me right there. In the bright daylight with the curtains wide open and people walking around outside, he grabbed hold of my throat and slammed me against the wall. My eyesight faded like I was going to collapse. Just before I went out, he let go and threw me down on the floor. That jolted my whole body and felt like my bones rattled. After that, everything became unclear. Maybe I blacked out or my mind was just refusing to function. However, I came back again in bits as he was gripping my shoulders, lifting me, and my neighbors ignored my screams. I sought refuge in the bathroom. Dialing Mom in Europe, I craved her voice. Dad joined as I panicked. I lied of being okay. They heard my husband's thumping. Though Dad's fury flared, he knew he couldn't reach me. I knew I must leave him. He acted as if nothing occurred after the pounding ceased. I devised a plan to escape him, waiting for the witching hour to commence my flight. I had to get my keys on the table without waking him up. I opened the door a crack. Then I had to run. Finally, I was on the road. It took me 9 hours to get home. I only stopped once for gas. I felt relieved as I drove. The nightmare was over. I was alive, but in shock. I don't want to meet my husband again. I need to know if anyone else feels this way. I can't be the only one. I used to wonder about life after death. I didn't believe it at first. I wanted proof. I searched everywhere, but nothing matched what I went through. I wasn't dreaming. The trouble started when I met my husband. It was the biggest mistake I ever made. I was only 20. He had no chance at first. I had a boyfriend, but he didn't give up. After a year, I discovered that my boyfriend had been disloyal. I thought Jay would be safe after my breakup. My gut warned me as he came to pick me up. I almost canceled. At first, no signs of danger, but his cruel hints and twisting facts made me doubt myself. Months later, his temper showed. I suffered sleep paralysis. I woke paralyzed, couldn't call or scream. In his parents' basement, we were trapped for a year. The nightmare began when I first attempted running on the treadmill. Lost in the music, I saw a small, childlike shadow dart across the room. My stomach dropped. I tore my headphones off, switched off the treadmill, and jogged upstairs. I was constantly thinking it was nothing, that my eyes were deceiving me. I had previously perceived shadows and shapes out of the corner of my eye, which vanished when I turned to look. But this was different. This was right in front of me. Nevertheless, I told myself it was more of my imagination. I tried to unwind. I wish I had been more vigilant. However, every inch of the house had Jay, and my endless quarrels made it feel odd, as if it were a choking atmosphere. But one night, while Jay was sleeping next to me, I began hearing footsteps from above moving from the hallway into the kitchen and back again. They were slow and firm at first. I thought it could be his parents getting some water, but then it happened again and again, the same feet sound going back and forth. I told myself that someone must have forgotten something, and that is why they were pacing up and down. But after around 30 minutes or maybe 40 of this, I began to feel uneasy. The next morning, I casually asked Jay's mother if his father had been up late pacing back and forth in the hallway and kitchen. She frowned and shook her head, saying that they had both been in bed all night long. When I compared this with the clock on the wall, I realized it was 3 a.m. I could not explain. I wanted to erase it from my mind, but a few nights later at exactly 3 a.m. the same time happened again. The only sound was footsteps. In the kitchen, 2 men talked in muffled tones above me. The conversation lasted about 40 minutes. My nerves got the best of me. I went upstairs and stood in the dark, listening. There was silence. I peeked into Jay's parents' room. They were asleep. When we got our own place, things worsened. Jay's anger was out of control. He became violent. I was scared. He beat me, and nothing calmed him. Odd things happened. Toys turned on in my stepson's empty room. The house felt wrong. It seemed someone watched me. I feared being home alone. Jay's parents' place had a similar feeling. I tried telling my sister, but she cut me off. She looked dazed. There was something wrong with that house. Others had warned me. She made my fear grow. The thing that finally scared me was hiking. My sister and I took shrooms. The trip was supposed to be enjoyable, but it turned into a nightmare. My body was screaming. Jay was danger. It was a non-negotiable rule. I had to leave Jay in the woods at night. It was terrifying. One moment I was enjoying the trip, the next my mind crashed. Thoughts were all over the place. It felt like a bumper car of ideas. I didn't know what to think, forcing the matter. This was a revelation. This was different from before. My body ignored what my mind was planning. It wailed the truth. I knew I had to leave him, but I didn't know how. At first I was scared to act, but love for someone else gave me courage. Spoiler alert, we are together now. Mary is the father of my baby. Back then I was stuck. Jay had hit me before, but one night he pulled a gun on me. That scared me. Every time he touched me, I felt sick. It wasn't just my mind. I felt physically ill. When he kissed me, he got too close. This was unprecedented. The worst fights did not affect my body. My body knew what my mind could not. The breakup was ugly. I wished it was over. But Jay was arrested months later. It was for child abuse material possession. I couldn't believe it. I broke down. My mind flooded with unpleasant memories. I had ignored my instincts before. The disgust I felt with Jay was real. It was like frozen puppets. During my husband's and my marriage, I had seen shadows because of security concerns. I felt embarrassed and burdened whenever he asked me to do extra work for him. My instinct warned me about something terrible that was going to happen. Throughout our marriage, I only had 2 paranormal encounters. At one time, something fell from the nightstand while we were doing some work later at night, and my stepson seemed to notice it too, but it was a ghostly sight. Another time, I heard a loud shout tackling from the bathroom, which I thought was my husband calling me, but when he came out, he said he hadn't said anything. Since I broke up with Jay in prison, I have not had any sleep paralysis. I can't explain it and probably will never be able to do so. I feel my brain struggling to rationalize things. It tries to attribute my worries to stress and paranoia. However, I believe I have a gut feeling that Jay may have been evil. Something was warning me. I had met her online, we had interesting chats that brightened my days. Gradually, I grew fond of her. Yet, upon realizing the 15-year age gap after we exchanged some photos, I was still naive. It was the fear of how my parents would react that compelled me to conceal my relationship. After a year, I planned a trip to Spain to meet for the first time. I managed to save up for this flight. Meeting Sophie felt surreal. Though we had been great friends online, the physical connection felt natural. Days later, I realized I loved her. She worked for the government and had her cozy apartment with an extra bedroom. She suggested I move in with her. I wanted, but my parents would never allow that. Meanwhile, I thought it wise to complete my studies first. I spent 2 weeks in Spain, then went back to Oregon, but we talked every day afterward. Our love grew even stronger. I later told my parents about relocating there, but they disagreed. They insisted I finish studying. Yet Sophie pressed me to prioritize my education first. In an effort to avoid being abandoned by Sophie, I figured transferring to a university in Spain that was doable. My parents were still on the verge of cutting me off. Eventually, We set up a life together while I settled into this country. This was the first time I've arrived alone. This was fine until Sophie started smothering me with her overbearing nature. It was almost worse than my mom since there were no first-hand familiarity, as she constantly followed me around outside. I thought I had made a mistake in looking for that freedom. Initially, things were hard since the language task was difficult, but later I did find some friends hardly. My independence, which was at stake in the relationship, felt like I was now imprisoned by a partner who demanded control over every aspect of my life. Sophie wanted to know wherever I was, whom I suggested it when I thought, and did very strictly about my finances, forcing me to rely entirely on her. Sophie was a very strict mistress. At times I felt like I would choke. I could speak little of foreign language, and thus it was unassisted even people. No friends were in the vicinity. I was not able to take her whims anymore. When I told my parents the truth, they bought me a ticket to go back home immediately. I left behind everything. As I stepped out of the plane, I could breathe again. The burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I needed to start all over again. I was not, however, able to catch up with the classes. It was really difficult. She kept saying I owed her rent. I never agreed to that. She went after me on social media, always finding me. It has been almost 18 years of that. Now and then, I still hear from her. Just 2 weeks ago, it said she would ruin my life. I broke up badly. I thought starting fresh in a new town would help. But the past always finds me. I am Elena, 26. My ex, Jake, 26, was always there. There were good times, but also very bad fights. He kept spying on me even after we split. I couldn't do this anymore. I was nervous, but I decided to move to a new city. My new apartment is small and cozy. The people here are nice, but nobody knows me. I felt free at last. For some months, I felt free. The new job, friends were secure. Then's when I noticed small stuff. I dismissed them. My brain is always forgetful. One evening, the door wasn't locked. I had seen the doctor earlier. I blamed it on fatigue. Jake's messages had stopped after I moved. Strangers began messaging. At first, they were casual, but then they knew too much about me, like my routines. I blocked them, but there were more. I began feeling watched when walking home alone, unable to shake the feeling. Have you ever felt this way? I would glance over my shoulder at times, though there was no one there, only cars whizzing past. Passing through this time, people did not know where my mind was. I was becoming paranoid. Later one night, as I was getting ready for bed, I saw a picture of Jake and me on my nightstand. I had torn it before, and the only person who could return it was a close friend of mine. I rushed over to the police with the photo and text I could not delete, but there was no real evidence against Jake. The police listened then. I, on my part, thought of what to do in the meantime. I had changed locks and taken on a reliable locksmith for the safety of my home. For some time I thought I had regained control, but one day another picture would be waiting for me. It was a picture of me sleeping shot from the inside of my house. The thought that Jake could have been watching me while I was sleeping horrified me. I could not come up with a solution to this one. Each little noise in my apartment shook me up. I started sliding a chair against my bedroom door at night and holding my phone while I slept. My friends were noticing changes in me and asked if something was wrong. How could I explain anything so horrifying without sounding insane? So, I convinced myself that my stress might be making me hallucinate or I was overreacting. But one rainy night made me realize the truth. I lay in bed listening to rain hitting the glass when suddenly I heard it. A click kind of sound of someone unlocking my front door. I was alert as always, even though I had nearly missed the sound because of the rain. My heart was pounding very fast. I lay still against my ribs, straining to hear the faint sound of footsteps. Step by step, they came slowly, as if they knew where they were headed. I knew it was Jake. He moved with confidence, as if he'd been there many times before. My hands trembled with fear, but I managed to dial 911 in a whisper. The footsteps grew closer. My heart raced as I prayed for the police to arrive soon. Then I heard the doorknob twist and jerk. I tried to keep the chair wedged under it. It was dead quiet. Then a low grunt from the intruder shook the handle violently. My heart pounded louder. But finally, I heard the sweet sound of sirens in the distance. The intruder must have heard them too, because the rattling stopped and footsteps moved away. By the time police got there, the front door was wide open and the man was gone, leaving no trace behind. All I had were my words and the terror clinging to me. Officers took my statement, said they'd watch the area, and told me to call back if anything else happened. I had to move again. Nobody knew except my family. The change was tough. I cut off all connections. It felt like losing bits of me, bursting my heart, but soon I relaxed again. No messages or traces of the stalker. I could finally breathe, ease off my guard. Then, on a Sunday, a small package came. It had no sender. I opened it cautiously and found a picture of me sleeping in my new place. I broke down, crying helplessly. Did not matter what I did. Jake had found me once more. At that moment, I understood one thing. I could run no longer. This wasn't just an obsession. It was a game he played. I was worn out, frightened, fed up with it all. So I decided to report it to the police. I showed them everything, photos, texts, evidence of my ordeal. They finally took me seriously and assigned someone to check on me from time to time. Days went by without hearing from Jake. Then weeks passed. Although I felt nervous inside, there was no sign of danger. The cop's presence must have scared him off. He must have known it was getting serious for him. I don't know why it took me long to think of it. A friend suggested I install cameras at my door and in my apartment. If Jake ever came back, I would have proof. I would feel relief for the first time. I could take charge and not just be a victim. It was time to regain control that seemed lost lately. Months sped by without any more troubles. I kept on going for therapy, which helped big time. There was this therapist who told me, besides all that went down, it weren't my fault. Also, I deserved to feel safe. Therapy was life-changing. It got me through the hurt and taught me how to live again. I found new friends in the process. I also reunited with some old ones. I again started dating. All these small victories were mine. They belonged to me, not Jake. He couldn't take what I had anymore. The moment I stopped having a victim's mind and rather saw everything like a booster gave me power. One night when returning from work, I saw a man standing across the street in the dark. My heart jumped. I thought it could be him, but then again I looked closer, and the guy was just a stranger. At that very moment, I had an epiphany. Not each and every person lurking at night intends to harm me. Over time, the terror subsided gradually. I started trusting people again and living without constantly glancing back around. Yet I didn't let down my guard. I changed the locks, had cameras everywhere, and kept alert all through. But my nerves were calmed down. The many years that followed, I led a normal life. Life went by with marriages, kids, and a perfect job. Then, I got an unexpected letter from Jake. He apologized and claimed to have transformed into a better person. I couldn't care less. I ripped the letter up. Jake had caused me enough pain and I had moved on. We could never meet again, and that I was certain of. My ordeal lasted about 4 long years. I am sorry for the lengthy story. It all started at the age of 18 years. I received the word "hey" via Facebook from Daniel Carter, a stable dude. Daniel had ghosted me when I was a crush. He tried to coax me into drinking. I ferociously refused. Some days passed and only then discovered my boyfriend's cheating habits. There were records of me looking for a way out, so I started talking with Daniel again, and we texted a lot until I liked him, though it seemed quick. He came up to see me in Billings, Montana one night after we had been on the road on our way back to Denver together. I felt my gut telling me something was off, but I was too young to listen to it to only go ahead and try to shake it off. The journey was enjoyable. We joked around all the while, but upon reaching home, it was a different story altogether. He began teasing me with images of gruesome video games that I had made no mention of liking at that time. I chose to give him a chance, and all was good during the first month of cohabitation. For a while, our living together was okay. But as soon as I acclimatized, the tiny things began raising my hackles. Thus came up quarrels from thin air. Thereafter, it was back again to shouting. Instead of cooler feelings, I convinced myself that quarrels were normal between couples and all would be well with him. Suddenly suggested swinging a lifestyle I did not understand and did not wish to be involved in. As a little child, I have always been friendly. However, I desired to live adventurously and not to seem dull. Therefore, my first attempt failed miserably as Daniel was getting progressively crueler. He made me feel controlled and uneasy. He looked through my phone at night while I slept, despite my having initially thought that there was nothing to hide from him. The rules weren't the same for me because checking on his phone was disallowed. As time passed, he hacked into all of my accounts. Last Friday night, while I checked my email, he got hold of my phone and discovered some of my personal pics, which had shocked me. When asked how he got it, he smirked, saying, "Remember when you used my phone to check your email?" Even though I logged out, he reset my passwords unnoticed. Hence, he read everything I posted online. His short fuses turned into rages, which made me live in fear of annoying him. I had to be cautious all day long not to cross him or else I would be in trouble. In my apprehension, I watched as Daniel's phone slipped from his grasp, directly hitting the floor. I had a momentary fear that it may not have survived the fall. To regain it, he bent over. I looked around vigilantly to see if by chance there was anyone who noticed us, while preparing myself for signal indicating that I was not inclined to assist him in any way. Even though I'd been around him all day, it was draining to hear him yell at me for the first of many times. Daniel then accused me of being the cause of the occurrence. His words filled the atmosphere with anxiety, causing a tight clench in my fists. The silence surrounding everyone else was quite heavy. Initially, we should have shared an enjoyable episode together, then had some fun when we returned home. This, however, was not possible as we started the other way, which made it quite awkward for me not being able to speak, yet doing something fun in playing the crying game later. It was around 8 o'clock in the morning when this quarrel erupted, thus lasting up until late night. That ignited a chain reaction I had to endure for 3 years continuously. The disputes grew to become more violent. My only relief was to have some cigarettes to calm me down. Unluckily, later on, Daniel would snatch them off me whenever he would feel insecure about my actions. Once he pushed me one night beyond endurance levels, I snapped. Having been feeling powerless upon him for many years was something I could not endure anymore. His reaction was, however, worse after that. He pulled me into his bedroom and then choked me while issuing threats directly at my face. I found it very difficult breathing since he was so powerful. My tears just flowed down uncontrollably. At last, when he saw them falling down, he loosened me from his grip and took a few steps back. His countenance was one of disgust towards himself. After that, he left the place without uttering anything more. All he mumbled was that he hadn't raised a finger against me before. After we had a big fight, I thought peace had returned. Unfortunately, it did not last long before another quarrel broke out. This time, David took out a gun. My heart raced with fear. I repeated calming words, but he was out of control. He pointed the gun at his head. He really wanted, to begin with, it was terrible to feel I was helpless in the situation. I have tried to leave the situation before, but he pulled me back every time. He had control over my social media. Thus, he knew my moves every time. Although I wanted to open up to my friends, this thought never left my mind. During this time, I got a new friend called Jay, now my husband. This makes David angry since he had been already having a strong bond with us from the beginning. My true feelings for Jay were killing me. We decided to utilize FaceTime to play Call of Duty with Jay. David was at work and I was about to start playing. When he got the start, I began receiving messages from him related to him. He accused me saying that I had an affair with Jay, and yet he was not true or either. After going through all these, I lost all my feelings for David. Thus, I started hanging out with Jay, who made me feel happy all the time, and yet I was horrible at leaving David, who always terrified me. I feared he would harm me and other family members if I attempted to leave him. I kept thinking my actions could hurt David instead of enhancing my life. He realized I had moved on and was no longer in love with him. I frequently constrained myself from doing things I found unacceptable, and he adopted a kind of overly sweet behavior that appeared phony, but was actually intended to make me remain loyal to him. When he kissed or touched me, I repeatedly felt disgusted by it, thus I endured it just to avoid arguments I did not want there. One evening, he desired sexual intercourse, although I wasn't interested. Nevertheless, I allowed him to. but he grew so violent that it hurt me, and I made it known such conduct was intolerable. He halted inflicting pain when I cried, but to me he seemed to enjoy it more, as if my agony satisfied some morbid desire of his. I felt completely shattered afterwards. It dawned on me how serious the matter was, and I began fearing worse would come. I entertained the thought that he might soon be capable of taking my life. At times, he would mockingly inquire about my earlier assaults, interspersing those with his twisted fantasies as well. I sensed everything about him was wrong, yet I was stuck trying to figure out how best to extricate myself from this without worsening my situation. The prospect of seeking police assistance seemed futile because we used the same vehicle. Thus, they wouldn't treat me seriously enough. Also, I feared what I would say if any encounter occurred with them. Ultimately, all I felt was hopelessness. David was arrested a week after I turned 23. My colleague told me to discard my weed and paraphernalia, and I hurried outside in the cold. 3 guys in hoodies mentioned my name and said they were looking for me. They told me David was arrested for 14 counts of child pornography. I cried so much I thought my heart had stopped. The next day, detectives took away my gaming consoles. They told me that David was sending naked pictures to little girls. I felt sick. When David called from jail, I lost my control. I asked him why he did this terrible thing. He wanted to be with me when he got out. I refused him. I told him how could he expect me to like people like him. David's parents supported him. They wanted the car I partly paid back. They told the police I was the troublemaker. They wanted me to be with him. I sank deeper into depression. I did not sleep and I cried all the time. I was given medicine. I was married, had a baby on the way. My friend said his dad was in jail with David. He spread a rumor that I cheated. I don't care what anybody says. David was mad as a hatter. If you find yourself in a bad relationship, just leave. Over a year, I dated a guy called Jake. It was tough due to fighting. Stuff was said that scared me. His dad drank too much. I saw the fear. At the end of school, Jake cheated at his birthday. We broke up. Later, I wasn't into him anymore. That was a long time ago. I heard he drank too. He lost control and went to a mental hospital. Some said schizophrenia, but I did not know for sure. I met my husband 9 years ago. We have been married for 5 years. We have a 3-year-old with another on the way. About a year ago, I got a text. The person asked if it was my name. I said yes. It felt wrong. He said his name was Jake. I replied that I was doing well. We used to date. He asked if I thought about us. I stared at my phone, cold hands. I typed, "Sorry, I have a husband. I don't want contact." He said okay and sorry. We had a talk about him in the past. I ran into his mother last week, who used to disrupt my family business. She looked happy as she had only left her husband and moved on. We talked for a bit, then she said something unexpected. "Did you hear Jake was in a place?" I had trouble swallowing that word, not enough words. The fact remains, that's unfortunate. She said he was in some way because he had killed lots of dear poor animals. He was out now though. "You were his favorite girlfriend. Do you remember him?" "So distant was like forever ago, lady. I got married and got a kid now," I said with a smile. "But he was never badly and brings you up." And I just freaked out. I went on to excuse myself and said that I had to get back to work, then hid until she left. What the heck? High school was a long time ago. We have grown. I did not like my ex when we first met. I hope he does not work where I do. I am not sure if he is still here. I do not want to see that strange ex from high school. When I was 21, I dated Jay. I was young and foolish, wanted to try out for something new. My first boyfriend, Mike, got in trouble as a child. He once burnt down a school. Jay seemed different. He said he found God and changed. I agreed to spend the night after a week, but as time passed, he grew too needy. He would instead fixate on my past. This made me uncomfortable. I had cheap phones and didn't save other people's numbers. I wasn't careful with texts. On Thanksgiving Eve, my friend asked me to sleep over. I got up early for a double shift the next day. My friend watched a movie at night. I woke up at 4 in the morning. He sounded mad and screamed. He called me a liar. He said he would break my face. I was confused. What was he shouting about? I asked him what was wrong. He thought I was cheating during breaks. My colleague was the only one I talked to outside at work. He had gone through my things and made up stories from my texts. His jealousy was based on my not saving names in my phone. I could see he wouldn't believe me. He held my arm tightly. I was scared and wanted to get away. I thought of an excuse or threat. I just got up and put on my clothes. I left without my phone. I didn't want to fight him. He was much bigger than me. I have a 115B girl, there was no way to win. I rushed to my sister's place and told her my secret. She called the girl, said, "Give back." My sister saw the insults, but it wasn't worth it, just an old phone. I had a meeting, no time for fight. The next day, a coworker warned me I looked terrible. My Facebook was filled with lies. My friends were worried. I deleted everything. I contacted my coworker, the guy was despicable. I read her messages. He knew my job, my home threatened me. Last message, "I'm right outside your job." I was scared. I was scared when I saw Mike's BMW in the parking lot. My heart raced. I didn't want the coworkers to know. The only option was to ask Jay for help. It was dark, and I hoped Mike wouldn't see me leaving. It was impossible to go home though, so I went to Jay's place as a rainbow to again before. My old texts with Jay were there. Mike found them. He went mad. He threatened to kill us both. He called Jay in the scary voicemails at 4 a.m. I feared he knew where Jay lived and worked since I had been careless before. This wasn't good now, was it? I wanted someone to check on me at night. It was real. It was my nightmare. My friends escorted me to my car. I carried on a taser and some pepper spray. I couldn't sleep anymore. The little noise alarmed me. I felt scared of Mike. He had been charged with DUI and assault. Though I am happy now with Jay and our 3 children, I sometimes fear running into Mike again. As a teen, I worked in a diner and met Jake, who was much older. At first, he seemed fine, yet the age gap was troubling. I had a bad feeling about him. One night, he scared me. As I stepped into my car, I locked the door and made myself laugh it off. Still, I had a gut feeling Jake wasn't right. I had to cut Jake off. He wouldn't leave me alone. He continually harassed me with his pointless lies and stories. The police suspected him of a restaurant robbery. There wasn't enough evidence though. They had my text to him, but they didn't help much. Jake saw my wariness and then vanished. 5 years later, he sent a friend request on Facebook. He claimed to have military clearance and land. I felt trapped by him. I scanned an unsolved murder thread today. His mugshot was included. He'd been caught for murder and other serious crimes. I felt relieved that he was in jail, but I had to wonder if I managed to be cautious, way too close to the wicked side at all times. When I first met Jake at the diner, he was 21 while I was just 16. He seemed like a cool guy at the start, but retroactively it was naive of me. 16-year-olds do not think about danger. Thereafter, I usually locked my door once I was in my car, just like the young way I used to be. Thus now these worries about my safety were rooted in that experience. Heard about Jake had some scary, but I feel not a good thing, which he did, that it was just very hard to believe. Clearly he really did any such things. Jake was at first in some ways charming at a meeting with, so there appeared to be normal behaviors beneath the surface. His eyes were quite disturbing and suspect, hence all that he was not well but truly flushed, and he shivers like terror would lurk. He followed me around for days on end, looking for chances. So, as this continuing scheme undone would suffice, because when people happen to have observed some signs with other, they never believe that those signs actually lead hence. Functioning alone, there was correct way of handling with him, directly address an issue when it was already at hand. It was when I saw Jake's picture interpolations indicating really bad things. He must have done that away quite out of character. Just could not seem putting together all pieces concerned. The earlier I had plus statements made in the police reports at times had become quite shocking stuff. The like around Jake as just being too sweet were popular people among Times boards. Board went along this in the course procrastination regularly called with no military tactics, where the people hence doing my name right now, such occurred sometime during their experiencing eavesdropping on activities of characterizing its methods of communication. While some have been raised, everyone could know what is happening at every given point. There were 7 days apart. Until then, a fear factor associated with him, nothing which happened next, peeled back, really revealed deeper who buried. I knew he was creepy, but this really made me uneasy. I was forced to be on my guard now. He was monstrous. There was a time in high school when I met a stalker. This is how it went down. I was only 17 when I met him on Facebook. He lived nearby and we planned to see a film together. I soon found myself dating him on that first date. When he came to my house, I noticed an ankle bracelet he wore for house arrest. When I asked, he didn't answer because he was a minor. My dad didn't know much of what went on. We only went to his house or an old YMCA town. I had a rebellious nature and he was too. That's why things got creepy quickly. His family was weird too. One time we were in his room and his dad peeped through the window blind. I screamed at him, but he just left. My love was so foolish, my boyfriend just said there was nothing strange about it. And then in his kitchen, I noticed the mother smoked the crack pipe. I couldn't take that again. I dumped him. But everything changed after that. He began crying and telling me about his cancer treatment. That time he told me he had little time left. I regretted breaking up with him. Once, there was an event at school. Then a big guy started stalking me. He stood outside of my class and watched me. When I left for my next class, he followed me closely. This went on for weeks. Then he began following me home, taking the same bus as me. Next, he stalked me like that outside of my house. Every time I looked out my window, there he was staring up at me for hours. I got so scared that I finally told him off, saying that we were not friends anymore and that I never wanted to see him again, but he just got worse. About 150 calls a night from him. Some were screaming, telling me how he wanted to hurt me. Some were songs that he played and sang on guitar about how special we were. I'd block one number and he would call with another. Then, one morning, I found a snowman sitting on the porch that had a knife in its head. It was soaked in deodorant of the exact kind I like. The voice inside was his, not singing Frosty the Snowman, whispering that I am his forever. He came closer. I thought I could be crash tackled when he gave me a hug, but it was too tight. He did not take advantage of me. He left me a voice message on apologies for Dad having a gun. When I woke at night, I saw him watching me. We got a restraining order. He goes coldly on Facebook. Everybody says if you wake up at night, it means you are being watched. People may be keeping an eye on you, which made me uneasy. I lost track of where he is and prefer not to find out.